Leave them behind. That's a direct order. Colonel Mercer's voice didn't shake, didn't waver. He said it the way someone orders lunch. Flat, routine, already moving on. 12 soldiers bleeding in the sand. A family of civilians pinned behind a collapsing mud wall. A mother shielding 2 children with her own body. And this man, miles away, safe behind concrete and satellite feeds, decided they were acceptable losses. Lieutenant Avery Caldwell stared at the radio in her hand. She could hear Sergeant Torres gurgling through a severed airway behind her. She could hear the mother praying. She keyed the radio and said 3 words that ended her military career. Negative, I'm staying. She dragged 7 men out of that kill zone with her bare hands. She tied off arteries with strips of her own uniform. And when it was over, the United States government didn't pin a medal on her chest. They erased her, classified the mission, buried her name. She became no one, until a chemical tanker exploded in a small Florida town, and 20 people needed someone who refused to let them die. If this story moves you, subscribe to this channel and follow me to the very end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches across the world. The explosion rattled the windows at 1:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and nobody at Seaside Memorial Hospital in Port Sentinel, Florida, understood what had just happened. Dana Morales dropped her coffee mug. It shattered on the floor, and she didn't bend down to pick it up because the ground was still vibrating under her feet. "What the hell was that?" she said. Patricia Okoye, the charge nurse, was already grabbing the desk phone. She punched in the fire department. Busy. She punched in dispatch. Busy. She punched in the personal cell of Dr. Richard Hensley, the trauma attending who'd left for lunch 40 minutes ago. It rang 5 times and went to voicemail. "Richard, call me back right now," Patricia said into the phone. Her voice was tight. "Something just exploded. I think it's close." It was close. A chemical tanker had detonated on Harborway Parkway, 600 yards from the hospital's front entrance. 47 vehicles caught in the blast radius. A gas station on the corner fully engulfed. Shrapnel sprayed across 3 lanes of traffic like a bomb had gone off, because essentially, one had. Nobody in the ER knew this yet. They just knew the building shook and the sirens started layering on top of each other. 3, then 7, then a sound so thick and continuous, it stopped sounding like sirens at all and started sounding like the world screaming. Avery Caldwell was counting pills at the medication cart on the 2nd floor when the windows rattled. Her hands stopped. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes went somewhere far away for exactly 2 seconds, and then she set the pill bottle down, locked the cart, and walked toward the elevator. She didn't run. Running attracts attention. She'd learned that a long time ago. Avery had been at Seaside Memorial for 21 days. In that time, she had done absolutely nothing worth noticing. She came in early, kept her head low, did her work with mechanical precision, and left without saying goodbye. She ate lunch alone. She didn't join conversations. When other nurses tried to pull her into gossip about Dr. Hendricks and his God complex, she smiled politely and found a reason to walk away. "She's weird," Dana had told Patricia during Avery's first week. "Not rude, just hollow, like there's nobody home." Patricia had shrugged. "She does her job. That's enough for me." It wasn't going to be enough today. The first ambulance backed into the bay at 1:54 p.m. The paramedic kicked the rear doors open while the rig was still rolling. "Chemical burns, both arms, face, airways compromised," he yelled. She was 20 feet from the tanker when it blew. The woman on the stretcher was making a sound Dana had never heard a human being make. A high, wet wheeze, like air being forced through a closing straw. Her skin from wrist to shoulder was blistered and weeping. Her eyelids were fused shut with swelling. Dana froze. 2 full seconds. She'd been a nurse for 9 years, and she had never seen anything like this. "Dana, Bay 3, move!" Patricia shouted. Dana moved, but her hands were trembling, and she couldn't make them stop. The second ambulance hit the bay 40 seconds later, then the third. Then two civilian cars screeched into the parking lot with doors already flying open. People stumbling out covered in blood and soot, and something chemical that smelled like melted tires. Patricia was trying to triage at the door, manage nursing assignments, and reach a doctor all at the same time. It wasn't working. She could feel control slipping through her fingers like water. "We need to prioritize," she said to the room. "We need to. Somebody help me think." "Red tags at the door," the voice came from behind her, calm, low. Not a shout, but it cut through the noise like a blade. "Yellow tags left hallway. Green tags in the waiting room. If they're walking, they don't get a bed. If they can talk, they can wait." Patricia spun around. Avery Caldwell was standing 3 feet away, and she looked nothing like the invisible woman who'd been haunting the medication carts for 3 weeks. "That's standard start triage," Avery said. "If we don't sort right now, we're going to lose the savable ones while we waste time on the ones who are already gone." Patricia stared at her. "You've done this before?" Avery ignored the question. "How many units of O negative in the blood bank?" "I don't." "Call them, now, and tell the lab to start thawing fresh, frozen plasma. We're going to burn through everything they've got." Patricia didn't argue. She didn't ask for credentials. She didn't ask how a 3-week nurse who couldn't make eye contact at morning huddle was suddenly talking like a battlefield surgeon. She picked up the phone and called the blood bank. 8 units, she said when she hung up. "That's all we have. 8 units of O negative." Something moved across Avery's face. Not panic, recognition. She'd done this math before. The ugly arithmetic of who gets saved and who doesn't when there's not enough blood to go around. "Okay," she said. "Here's what we're doing." She turned to Dana. "Airway management. Every patient who comes through that door, your first job is breathing. If they can't maintain their own airway, you bag them and you flag me. Don't wait for a doctor's order. Don't wait for permission. Flag me." Dana nodded fast. Avery pointed at the 2 residents standing by the central station, both of them looking like they'd been dropped into a war zone in their pajamas. "Names. James Okoro. Priya Vasan. James, vitals on every red tag, blood pressure, pulse ox, respiratory rate. If you run out of wristbands, write the numbers on their foreheads with a Sharpie. Priya, IV access. Every red tag gets a line. Go antecubital first. If the veins are blown, go intraosseous." Priya's face went white. "I've only done intraosseous once, in simulation." "Then today's your second time. It's exactly the same except the patient is real. Go." Priya went. Todd Linden, the PA, appeared at Avery's shoulder. "I can suture and reduce dislocations." "Good. You're on yellow tags. Lacerations, fractures, controlled bleeds. Your only job is to keep stable patients from becoming unstable patients. Nothing else exists for you right now." Todd disappeared into the hallway. 4 minutes. Avery had restructured the entire emergency department in 4 minutes. Triage system, roles, chain of command, blood allocation priority, all of it, spoken in a voice that never once rose above the volume of a normal conversation. Patricia stood there watching and felt the hair stand up on her arms. This wasn't nursing skill. This was something else entirely. At 2:11 p.m., a construction worker named Miguel Reyes came in on a backboard. Burns on his torso, a chunk of twisted metal buried in his thigh. But the thing that was going to kill him was his breathing. Rapid, shallow, and his left chest wall wasn't rising. "Avery!" Dana shouted from across the room. "This one's breathing wrong. Left side's not expanding." Avery was beside him in 6 seconds, hands on his chest, stethoscope on the left side. Nothing. No breath sounds. Dead silence where there should have been air moving. "Tension pneumo," she said. "His lungs collapsed. Trapped air is compressing his heart. He's going to code in 90 seconds. James looked up. We need to page a doctor. We need imaging to confirm. He'll be dead before the image loads. She didn't say it with emotion. She said it the way you'd say water is wet. 14-gauge needle. Now. You can't. A nurse can't. James, get the needle. He got the needle. 7 minutes later, a mother burst through the doors carrying a 4-year-old boy who wasn't crying. Avery's head snapped toward them instantly. A child in pain screams. A child in fear cries. A child who is silent is a child whose body is giving up. He was in the car, the mother sobbed. The glass, the explosion. He was in the back seat and the glass. Avery took the boy from her arms. Gentle but fast. She laid him on the nearest open gurney and pressed her fingers to his neck, pulse thready and racing. She touched his belly, rigid as a board, distended. He's bleeding internally, she said. Priya, 2 large-bore IVs. Run saline wide open. Call surgery and tell them I've got a pediatric patient, suspected splenic lac, and he needs an OR in 30 minutes or less. Surgery's not picking up, Priya said, and her voice cracked on the last word. Then you call them again, and again, and again until a human being answers that phone. Avery leaned down to the boy. His eyes were half closed and glassy. She put her hand on his forehead, cool, damp, shocky. Hey, buddy, she said. I know you're scared. I need you to stay with me. Can you do that? Just keep your eyes on me. He blinked. One tiny nod. That's my brave guy. She held his hand while Priya placed the IVs. She held his hand while she calculated fluid bolus in her head. She held his hand while she ran the clock on how long they had before his pressure dropped past the point where fluid alone couldn't bring him back. She didn't let go until surgery answered on the 9th call. At 2:30 p.m., the ER held 22 patients. The hallway was an overflow ward. The waiting room was a treatment area. Every bed, every chair, every flat surface had a human being on it. Still no attending physician. Patricia grabbed Avery between patients. Dr. Singh called. She's still 10 minutes away. Traffic's not moving. 10 minutes is fine. How are you doing this? Patricia asked. The professional mask was gone. This was one human being asking another something she couldn't explain. 3 weeks ago, you wouldn't look at me during huddle. Now you're running a mass casualty event like it's Tuesday afternoon. Something cracked behind Avery's eyes. Fast, like a door opening half an inch and then slamming shut. I've done this before, she said quietly. Where? A new ambulance was backing into the bay. Avery turned and walked toward it. At 2:37 p.m., a firefighter was wheeled in seizing. Full-body convulsions so violent, 2 paramedics couldn't keep him on the stretcher. Chemical exposure. The toxin had gotten through his respirator. Organophosphate poisoning, Avery said before anyone asked. 2 milligrams atropine, IV push, right now. Have pralidoxime ready. If the atropine doesn't break this in 60 seconds, we're going to need it. Priya grabbed for the medication drawer. Her hands were shaking badly. She'd been running non-stop for nearly 50 minutes, and the adrenaline was souring into something closer to collapse. Priya, not sharp, not soft, just steady. Look at me. Priya looked. You're doing an incredible job. I need a little more. Can you give me that? Priya took one breath. Her hands settled. She drew up the atropine, checked the dose, and pushed it. The firefighter's convulsions slowed, stopped. His eyes rolled back to center. His breathing went from ragged to rhythmic. Welcome back, Avery said softly. Todd burst in from the hallway, scrubs painted with someone else's blood. Room 4, femoral bleed. I can't stop it with pressure. He's going fast. How much has he lost? Enough that the floor looks like someone was murdered in there. Avery followed him. The patient was a heavy-set man in his 50s, a deep gash on his inner thigh from a piece of the tanker's shell casing. The femoral artery was nicked, not severed, but nicked enough that blood was pulsing out in rhythmic jets, that synced with his heartbeat. Every pulse, another surge of red. Standard tourniquet won't work this high up, Avery said. She grabbed hemostatic gauze and a wide elastic bandage. Hold his leg, don't let him move. Todd held. Avery packed the wound deep, layer after layer of gauze shoved into living tissue with a force that made the man scream through gritted teeth. I know, she said to him, her hands steady even as he writhed. I know it's bad, but this is what's keeping your blood inside your body. I need you still. Can you give me still? He grabbed the bed rail so hard the metal groaned. Tears ran down both sides of his face, but he held. Avery wrapped the bandage tight, way tighter than any protocol would recommend, and secured it. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. Don't touch the packing, she told Todd. If it starts again, you call me. Nothing else. Just call me. Dr. Singh walked through the ER doors at 2:48 p.m., braced for chaos. She stopped 3 steps in. It wasn't chaos. It was a machine. Patients triaged by color. IVs running. Charts updated. Critical cases monitored. Stable patients managed in the hallway with scheduled reassessments. It looked like a trauma center run by someone who'd been doing this their entire career. Who's running this? Dr. Singh asked Patricia. Patricia pointed at Avery, who was adjusting oxygen flow on a teenager with inhalation burns. The new nurse? The quiet one? She's not what we thought she was, Patricia said. Dr. Singh walked over and touched Avery's shoulder. I'm here. Report. Avery turned. For half a second, the old mask flickered. The empty nurse, the ghost who drifted through shifts without being seen. But it couldn't hold anymore. Too much had happened. Too many people had watched her do things that no ordinary nurse could do. 20 patients triaged and stabilized, she said. 3 needle decompressions for tension pneumothorax. 1 organophosphate poisoning reversed with atropine. Femoral bleed packed and controlled. Pediatric patient with suspected splenic laceration sent to surgery 11 minutes ago. 8 units of O-negative allocated across 4 patients based on injury severity and likelihood of survival. No deaths, no cardiac arrests. Everyone is still breathing. Dr. Singh didn't move for a long time. You performed needle decompressions, she said. 3. Without a physician present. There was no physician present. That is outside your scope of practice. So is watching a man suffocate to death on the floor because of a licensing rule. Dr. Singh opened her mouth, closed it. She looked at the ER around her, the blood on the floor, the packed hallways, the 20 human beings who were alive right now because someone had refused to wait for permission. Who trained you? She asked. Avery said nothing. By 3:02 p.m., the flood had crested. Ambulances were rerouting to other hospitals. The pace downshifted from sprint to heavy breathing. The crisis wasn't over, but the killing edge had passed. Dana sat on the floor behind the nurse's station, knees pulled to her chest, crying with relief she couldn't explain. James stood at the charting station, his pen trembling so hard the handwriting was illegible. Priya was in the supply room, staring at empty shelves, looking like someone who had just discovered she was capable of things she'd never imagined. Avery washed her hands at the sink in Bay 7. Slow, methodical. Water running over her fingers like a ritual she'd performed 100 times after 100 other days like this. Patricia watched her from the doorway. Avery, 20 people. We saved 20 people, Avery said without turning around. No, we followed your lead. You saved them. And everyone in this building knows the difference. Avery shut off the water, dried her hands, folded the paper towel into a precise square, dropped it in the trash, turned around. The automatic doors at the end of the hallway open. Not fast, not panicked, deliberate. The kind of deliberate that makes your stomach clench before your brain figures out why. 3 people walked in, 2 men and a woman, dark slacks, plain button-downs, jackets tailored just loose enough to hide what was underneath, polished shoes, Polished expressions, the kind of calm that isn't calm at all, but a mask worn by people whose entire profession is controlling what their face reveals. They didn't stop at the front desk, didn't look around, didn't ask for directions. They walked straight down the hallway toward Base 7. Patricia stepped into their path. "This area is restricted. Can I?" The woman raised a credential wallet. 3 letters caught the fluorescent light. FBI. "We're not here for a patient," she said. They stopped 5 feet from Avery. Her back was to them. Her hands were gripping the counter edge so hard her knuckles had gone bloodless white. She knew. Before anyone said a single word, she already knew. The lead agent, a man in his 50s, gray threading his temples, eyes that carried the weight of classified files and redacted reports in conversations that never officially happened, spoke. He didn't say Nurse Caldwell. He didn't say Ms. Caldwell. He said Lieutenant Caldwell. The word detonated. Dana looked up from the floor. James dropped his pen. Priya stepped out of the supply room. "Doctor." Singh lowered her chart to the desk with exaggerated slowness, like she was handling something fragile. "Lieutenant." Avery's shoulders rose once. A single deep breath drawn from somewhere very old and very deep. Then they fell. "Nobody's called me that in a long time," she said. "No, ma'am," the agent said. "They haven't." She turned around, and every single person in that emergency room finally saw her. Not the forgettable transfer, not the ghost who haunted the night shift, not the woman who ate lunch alone and disappeared into paperwork. They saw someone who had been carrying something unbearable for years, something that had ground her down to nothing, and she was still standing. "How'd you find me?" she asked. The agent looked at his colleagues, looked back at her. "Lieutenant, we've always known where you were." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Blood was still drying on the floor. 20 people were still breathing who shouldn't have been. And Avery Caldwell stood in the middle of all of it, staring into the face of a past she had spent years trying to kill, understanding with sickening, razor-sharp clarity that it had been watching her the entire time. And it had finally decided to walk through the door. The lead agent's name was Martin Hale. He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't flash a smile. He stood with his feet shoulder-width apart, hands folded in front of his belt, and he watched Avery the way someone watches a grenade they're not sure is live. "We need to talk," he said, privately. Avery didn't move. "You walked into my ER in front of my entire team and called me by a rank that's supposed to be classified. There's nothing private left." Hale's jaw tightened. "Lieutenant, don't call me that." "Fine. Ms. Caldwell, we need a room. Now." Patricia stepped forward. "There's a conference room at the end of the hall. It's empty." Avery looked at Patricia. Something passed between them. Not words, not even understanding, just the quiet acknowledgement that whatever was about to happen had been coming for a long time. "I'll be back," Avery said. "Take your time," Patricia replied, though everything in her voice said the opposite. Avery walked down the hallway with the 3 agents behind her. She didn't look back. Dana watched her go and grabbed Patricia's arm. "What the hell is happening?" "I don't know." "Lieutenant, she's military? She's, what, special forces?" "I said I don't know, Dana." "She just saved 20 people and the FBI shows up? That doesn't happen to normal people. That doesn't—" "Dana." Patricia turned and looked her in the eye. "We have patience. Focus." Dana let go of her arm, but she didn't stop watching the hallway where Avery had disappeared. The conference room was small and cold. A rectangular table, 6 chairs, a whiteboard nobody had erased from the last meeting. Avery pulled out a chair and sat down. She didn't wait to be invited. She didn't fold her hands politely. She sat like someone who'd been interrogated before and knew exactly how the game was played. Agent Hale sat across from her. The woman, Agent Reeves, stood by the door. The second man, Agent Cho, opened a laptop and set it on the table without turning it on. 3:14 p.m. "When's the last time you heard the name Operation Silent Ridge, Hale asked. Avery's face didn't change, but her hands, resting on the table, pressed flat against the surface so hard her fingertips turned white. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Yes, you do. I'm a nurse at a community hospital in Florida. I don't know anything about... You're Lieutenant Avery Caldwell, United States Army Special Operations, assigned to the 528th Medical Detachment, deployed to eastern Afghanistan as part of a 12-person unit under the command of Colonel Douglas Mercer on a classified extraction mission designated Silent Ridge. 11 members of your unit were killed. You were the sole survivor. You were medically discharged, your records sealed, and you relocated to Tennessee under a civilian identity before transferring to Florida 3 weeks ago. Hale recited it the way someone reads a grocery list. Would you like me to continue, or are we past the part where you pretend you don't know what I'm talking about? Avery said nothing for a long time. The fluorescent light above them buzzed. The air conditioning clicked on. 11 members weren't killed, she said finally. Her voice was low, barely above a whisper. 7 were killed in the initial ambush. 4 more died because Colonel Mercer called in an airstrike on our own position to cover up the mission failure. He killed his own people, and the United States government helped him do it. Hale didn't blink. That's one version of events. That's the only version. I was there. So was Colonel Mercer, and his account differs significantly from yours. Something dangerous moved behind Avery's eyes. Mercer was 6 miles away in a command bunker when he ordered that strike. He wasn't lying in a ditch with 2 wounded soldiers while bombs dropped on top of us. He wasn't holding Sergeant Torres's hand when Torres bled out because the medevac Mercer canceled was the only thing that could have saved him. Don't you dare sit here and tell me his account differs. Agent Reeves shifted by the door. Agent Cho's hand hovered over the laptop. Hale held up one palm, a gesture that could have meant calm down or could have meant let her keep talking. Lieutenant, we're not here to relitigate what happened on Silent Ridge. Then why are you here? Because 8 days ago, a sealed intelligence file was reopened by the Defense Intelligence Agency. New signals intelligence. Intercepted communications from an asset we believed was dead. The intercepts reference Silent Ridge, and they reference you specifically. Avery's stillness changed. Before it had been controlled, the trained calm of someone who knew how to mask emotion. Now it was the stillness of someone who has just heard a sound in a dark room and doesn't know what made it. Reference me how? She said. By name, by rank, by the specific actions you took during the final hours of the mission. That's impossible. That mission is classified. Nobody outside the Pentagon and Mercer's command chain even knows it happened. Exactly, Hale said, which is why the DIA is very interested in how an overseas asset has details that should only exist in a sealed file. 3:22 p.m. The weight of what Hale was saying settled over the room like smoke. You think someone leaked it, Avery said. We know someone leaked it. Mercer. Hale didn't confirm or deny. We're not here to discuss suspects. You don't have to discuss him. I'll tell you right now. Douglas Mercer has spent 6 years making sure Silent Ridge stayed buried because if the truth came out, he'd spend the rest of his life in Leavenworth. If that file is suddenly in someone else's hands, it's because Mercer either traded it or lost control of it. Either way, it leads back to him. That's a significant accusation. It's not an accusation, it's a fact. The same man who bombed his own soldiers to protect his career is the same man who would sell classified intelligence to protect his freedom. You know this. That's why you're here talking to me instead of talking to him. Hale leaned back in his chair. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not agreement exactly, but the crack of someone whose official position is at war with what he personally believes. We need your help, Lieutenant. I told you not to call me that. We need your help, Ms. Caldwell. The intelligence that was intercepted doesn't just reference the mission. It references specific medical actions you performed during the final phase. Actions that were never included in any official report because the official report says you abandoned your unit and fled. The room went dead silent. Avery's jaw locked. A vein in her neck pulsed visibly. Her eyes went glassy, not with tears but with a rage so deep it had nowhere to go. "Say that again," she whispered. "The official record states that during the final phase of Operation Silent Ridge, you disobeyed a direct order, abandoned your assigned position, and fled the engagement zone, resulting in the deaths of—" "I didn't abandon anyone." Her voice cracked. Not from weakness, from the sheer force of keeping something massive locked behind her teeth for 6 years. "I disobeyed a retreat order because there were wounded soldiers who couldn't move. Torres had a severed femoral. Jackson had bilateral pneumothorax. Chen had a spinal injury. Mercer ordered a full retreat, knowing those 3 men couldn't be moved without killing them. I stayed. I stayed and I worked on them with my bare hands, while Mercer called in the airstrike that was supposed to kill all 4 of us." "And yet you survived," Hale said. "I survived because I dragged 2 of them into a drainage ditch and covered them with my body. Torres died in my arms 60 seconds before the bombs stopped. Jackson survived long enough for me to get him 200 yards to a civilian road, where a local farmer drove him to a village clinic. He died 3 hours later from internal bleeding because the medevac that should have saved him was canceled by a man who cared more about his stars than his soldiers." She paused, drew one ragged breath. "Chen died in the ditch. He was 22 years old. He was from Bakersfield, California. He had a 2-year-old daughter he'd never held because she was born while he was deployed. And Douglas Mercer killed him. 3:29 p.m. Agent Reeves was no longer standing by the door with her arms crossed. She was leaning against the wall with one hand pressed flat against it, as if she needed something solid to hold on to. Agent Cho had closed the laptop. Hale sat motionless. His face was professional. His eyes were not. "He has diplomatic protections. He has allies in the Pentagon. And as of right now, the official record says he's a decorated hero, and you're a disgraced officer who abandoned her unit." Avery laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was the sound of someone who had carried a lie on their back for 6 years and just been told the lie was still winning. "So what do you want from me?" she said. "You want me to testify? You want me to go on record against a full-bird colonel with friends in every building that matters in Washington while I'm a nobody nurse in a town nobody's heard of? That's your plan?" "We want you to look at the intercepts," Hale said. "We want you to confirm whether the operational details match your first-hand experience. And we want you to help us understand something that doesn't make sense." "What doesn't make sense?" Hale opened the laptop. He turned it around to face her. On the screen was a single document, a scanned page with heavy black redaction bars covering most of the text. But one paragraph was visible. Avery read it. Her face changed. Not gradually, not in stages. It changed the way a window changes when a rock goes through it. Instant, total, irreversible. "That's not possible," she said. "We had the same reaction. This says—" She stopped, read it again. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. "This says Jackson is alive. Corporal Derek Jackson, yes. Jackson died. I was told he died. The Army sent his family a flag. There was a funeral, his mother." Avery pushed back from the table. The chair scraped the floor. "You're telling me he survived?" "We're telling you the intercepts contain communication from an individual using Jackson's service credentials, referencing events from Silent Ridge with accuracy that would be impossible for anyone who wasn't there. That doesn't mean he's alive. Someone could have stolen his identity. Mercer could have." "The communications include a phrase that was used as an internal call sign within your unit. A phrase that was never written down, never recorded, and never included in any report. It was verbal only, shared among the 12 members of your team." Avery stopped breathing. Her chest locked. Her eyes went wide, and then narrow, and then wide again, like someone trapped between hope and terror and unable to choose. "What phrase?" she asked. Hale looked at her steadily. "We were hoping you'd tell us." 3:38 p.m. The trap was elegant. Avery understood it immediately. If she provided the call sign and it matched what was in the intercepts, it would confirm two things at once: that she was telling the truth about her experience on Silent Ridge, and that whoever was sending those communications had genuinely been part of the unit. If she refused, the investigation would stall, the official record would remain intact, and Mercer would continue living as a decorated hero while she continued living as a ghost. She closed her eyes. Behind them, she was back in that ditch, dirt in her mouth, the taste of blood, hers, Torres's, Chen's, all mixed together until it was just one terrible copper flavor that she could still taste 6 years later if she let herself. The bombs had stopped. The silence after was worse than the explosions because silence meant either everyone was dead or the killing was pausing to reload. Jackson was beside her, alive, barely. His eyes were open, and he was looking at her with an expression she had never been able to forget. Not fear, not pain, but an absolute childlike trust. He trusted her to keep him alive. He trusted her the way you trust the ground to hold you up. She'd said to him, "Stay awake, stay with me." And he'd whispered, the call sign. Not because it mattered tactically anymore, because it was the only thing left that connected them to who they had been before everything went wrong. A word that meant, we're still us. We're still a team. We're still alive. Avery opened her eyes. "Starfall," she said. Hale didn't react, but Reeves by the door inhaled sharply enough that everyone heard it. "The call sign was Starfall," Avery repeated. "Torres came up with it the second night of the deployment. He said it was what his daughter called shooting stars. Nobody wrote it down. Nobody reported it. We just used it when we needed to know we were talking to our own people." Hale typed something on the laptop. He stared at the screen for 3 seconds. Then he looked at her. "It's a match," he said. 3:41 p.m. Avery put both hands over her face. She pressed her palms into her eyes so hard she saw white. Her shoulders trembled once, then stilled. "He's alive," she said through her hands. "Someone using his credentials and his unit's internal call sign is communicating from a location we haven't been able to pinpoint." "Yes." "Where?" "We don't know yet."
How long has he been communicating?
"The first intercept was flagged 11 days ago. There may be earlier communications that weren't caught." 11 days. 11 days and you're just now telling me. "We had to verify. We had to confirm your identity and location before making contact." "You said you always knew where I was." "Knowing where someone is and choosing to make contact are two different decisions, Lieutenant." She pulled her hands from her face. Her eyes were red but dry. Whatever was happening inside her was too deep for tears. Too deep, too complicated, too tangled with grief and rage, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. "If Jackson is alive," she said slowly, "then the official report isn't just wrong. It's a deliberate cover-up. Mercer told command that everyone was killed. He confirmed the body count. If Jackson survived, Mercer either knew and lied, or he didn't bother to check before he called in the airstrike and then falsified the records. Both possibilities are being investigated. Both possibilities are war crimes." Hale didn't argue. The door opened. Patricia was standing there, and the look on her face made it clear she hadn't been eavesdropping. She didn't need to. The walls were thin, and Avery's voice had carried. "The hospital administrator is here," Patricia said quietly, "and the local police, and Channel 7 News has a van in the parking lot. Word about what happened in the ER is getting out." Avery looked at her. "They're calling you a hero," Patricia said. 3:47 p.m. Avery stood up. The chair didn't scrape this time. She rose with a slow, heavy precision of someone who has just realized that the wall they've been leaning against for 6 years was never a wall at all. It was a door, and it just swung open into something enormous and terrifying. "I need to go back to my patients," she said to Hale. "We're not finished." "I am. For right now, I am." "Lieutenant, I have 20 people out there who need post-crisis monitoring. I have nurses who've been running for 2 hours straight without a break. I have a 4-year-old boy in surgery who might not make it. That is what's in front of me right now. Whatever is in that laptop can wait until those people are taken care of." Hale studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "We'll be in the parking lot," he said. "When you're ready, we'll continue." Avery walked out of the conference room and back down the hallway toward the ER. Every step felt different now. Not heavier, not lighter, just different, like walking on ground that had shifted beneath her feet and hadn't settled yet. Dana was waiting at the nurse's station. She took one look at Avery's face and handed her a cup of water without saying a word. Avery drank it in 3 swallows. "You okay?" Dana asked. "No." Dana nodded like that was the most honest answer she'd ever received. "The little boy, the one with the belly injury, surgery says he's stable. They got to the spleen in time. He's going to make it." Something broke open in Avery's chest. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a small, quiet collapse, like a wall that had been holding back a river developing its first crack. "Good," she said. "That's good." "Because of you," Dana said. "You know that, right? If you hadn't caught it, if you hadn't pushed us, he would have bled out in the hallway. A 4-year-old kid." "Dana," I froze. When that first patient came in, I froze. 2 full seconds. That could have killed someone. It didn't. Because you were there. Avery set the cup down. She looked at Dana, really looked at her, and for the first time, Dana saw behind the mask. She saw exhaustion so deep it had fossilized. She saw grief that had been compressed under so much pressure, it had turned into something unrecognizable. And she saw something else beneath all of it, a ferocious, unbreakable refusal to let anyone die on her watch. "You didn't freeze because you're weak," Avery said. "You froze because you're human. The fact that you moved after 2 seconds means you're the kind of nurse who pushes through fear. That's not failure, that's courage." Dana's eyes filled. She wiped them fast with the back of her hand. "Who are you?" she asked. 3:53 p.m. James was standing at the charting station, and he'd heard enough. He turned around with a look that was equal parts admiration and disbelief. "The needle decompressions," he said. "I told you to wait for imaging. I was wrong. If we'd waited, that man would be dead." "You weren't wrong to want confirmation," Avery said. "You were wrong about the timeline. In a mass casualty event, the timeline is the diagnosis. You learn that, and you'll be the kind of doctor people are lucky to have." James swallowed hard. "Where did you learn it?" Avery didn't answer. She picked up a chart and started reviewing vitals. Priya came out of the supply room. Her scrubs were streaked with things she didn't want to identify. Her hands had stopped shaking, but her eyes had the glassy, 1,000-yard quality of someone whose reality had been rearranged in the last 2 hours. "The IO access on the firefighter," Priya said. "I did it. I actually did it." "You did it perfectly," Avery said without looking up from the chart. "I didn't think I could." "That's the only time it counts." Dr. Singh approached the nurse's station. She had spent the last 30 minutes catching up on every patient, reviewing every intervention, checking every medication dose in every procedure Avery had performed. She set a stack of charts on the counter. "I've reviewed everything," she said. "Every decision you made was clinically sound. The needle decompressions were textbook. The atropine dosing was exact. The blood allocation was..." She paused, searching for the word. "Strategic. You didn't just prioritize by severity, you prioritized by survivability. You made triage decisions that most attending physicians would struggle with, and you made them in real time under conditions that would break most trauma surgeons. Avery said nothing. The hospital is going to want answers, Dr. Singh said. You perform procedures outside your scope. There will be a review. There will be questions. I know. I will be documenting that in my professional opinion. Every action you took was medically necessary and directly responsible for saving multiple lives. Whatever review comes, I will stand behind you. Avery looked up from the chart. You don't have to do that. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because it's true. 4:01 p.m. The hallway was quieter now. The frantic energy had drained away, replaced by the heavy, stunned silence that follows a crisis. The silence where people realize what just happened, and their bodies start collecting the bill for 2 hours of adrenaline. Avery walked the floor. She checked on every patient, every single one. She adjusted IVs. She reviewed vitals. She spoke to the ones who were awake and held the hands of the ones who were too sedated to know she was there. She stopped at Miguel Reyes's bed. He was conscious now, his chest rising and falling evenly, the needle decompression site covered with a clean dressing. Hey, she said, how are you feeling? Like someone shoved a needle through my ribs, he said. Then he managed a weak smile. But I'm breathing, so I guess I can't complain. You can complain all you want. You earned it. The paramedic told me what happened. He said I was 60 seconds from dying and you just did it, like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. Who taught you to do that? Avery adjusted his oxygen and checked his pulse ox. Get some rest, Miguel. You're going to be sore for a while, but you're going to be fine. She moved on before he could ask again. At the end of the hallway, through the glass doors, she could see the FBI's black sedan parked under the awning. Hale was standing beside it, talking on his phone. Reeves was sitting in the passenger seat, staring at a tablet. Cho was leaning against the hood with his arms crossed, watching the hospital entrance. They were waiting for her. They would keep waiting for as long as it took, because somewhere out there, in a location nobody could pinpoint, through channels nobody could trace, a dead man was sending messages. A man she had held in a ditch while the sky burned. A man whose hand she had gripped while she told him to stay awake. Stay with me. Stay with me. A man the United States Army had buried with full honors in a closed casket at Arlington National Cemetery, while his mother sobbed and a colonel with blood on his hands saluted the flag. Derek Jackson, alive. Avery pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the hallway window. She closed her eyes. She let herself feel it, all of it, for exactly 5 seconds. The hope that was so sharp it drew blood. The rage that had been burning at a low flame for 6 years and was now roaring. The terror of what it would mean if it was true, and the deeper terror of what it would mean if it wasn't. Then she opened her eyes, straightened her back, and walked back toward the ER. There were patients who needed her. There was a past that had finally caught up, and somewhere between the two, Avery Caldwell was going to have to decide which version of herself she was willing to be, the ghost who hid or the soldier who fought. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The blood on the floor was drying to a dark, stubborn brown. And in the parking lot, 3 federal agents sat in a black sedan with a laptop full of classified intercepts, waiting for a woman who had already survived the unsurvivable to tell them she was ready to do it again. Avery walked back through the ER doors at 4:09 p.m. with the word Starfall still burning in her chest like a coal she'd swallowed. She picked up a chart. She checked a blood pressure. She changed a dressing on a burned patient's forearm. Her hands were steady. Her hands were always steady. It was everything behind them that was falling apart. Dana watched her from the nurse's station and said nothing. Patricia watched her from the hallway and said nothing. They had both seen her face when she came out of that conference room, and they both understood that whatever had happened in there had cracked something open that couldn't be closed again. At 4:14 p.m., Patricia's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her expression tightened. Avery, yeah? Hospital administration just sent an email to every department head. They're launching an internal review of today's emergency response. Specifically, they're reviewing all procedures performed by non-physician staff. Avery didn't look up from the chart. That means me. That means you. The chief medical officer wants to meet with you tomorrow morning at 8. Fine. It's not fine. Dr. Hendricks is on the review board. Now Avery looked up. Dr. Hendricks, the senior attending who had been conveniently absent during the entire crisis, who had strolled in at 3:30 p.m. after the blood was mopped and the patients were stabilized, who had walked the ER with his hands clasped behind his back like a general inspecting a battlefield he'd never set foot on. Hendricks wasn't here, Avery said. Doesn't matter. He's the most senior physician on staff. He chairs the review board, and he's already told 2 people that what happened today was reckless and that someone could have died because an unqualified nurse played doctor. Something cold settled behind Avery's eyes. 20 people didn't die because I acted. How many would have died if I'd waited for him to finish his lunch? I know that. Everyone who was here knows that. But Hendricks has the title, and titles win arguments in hospitals. 4:19 p.m. Doctor. Singh found Avery restocking the supply room. She closed the door behind her. I just got off the phone with the chief medical officer, Singh said. He's under pressure from the hospital's legal counsel. They're worried about liability. A nurse performing needle decompressions, administering medications at physician-level dosing, making triage decisions about blood allocation. Those are all things that could expose the hospital if any of those patients has a bad outcome. Every one of those patients is alive, Avery said. Right now, yes, but if one of them develops a complication in the next 72 hours, an infection at the decompression site, a reaction to the atropine, anything, the lawyers are going to point at you and say an unqualified provider made decisions above her certification. They'll throw you under the bus to protect the institution. Avery set a box of gauze on the shelf. She turned to face Singh. Are you telling me to be scared? I'm telling you to be prepared. Hendricks is going to come at you hard tomorrow. He's going to frame this as a rogue nurse acting without authority. He's going to ignore the fact that no physician was available and focus entirely on the fact that you stepped outside your scope. And what are you going to do? Singh straightened. I'm going to tell the truth. I reviewed every intervention. Every single one was medically appropriate. You saved lives, period. But I need you to understand that the truth doesn't always win in these situations. Politics does. I've dealt with politics before, Avery said, and the way she said it carried the weight of a 6-year-old airstrike. 4:27 p.m. Agent Hale appeared in the ER. He didn't come to the nurse's station. He didn't approach Avery directly. He stood near the vending machines at the edge of the waiting area and caught her eye. She walked over. We need to resume, he said. I told you, when my patients are stable. Your patients are stable. Dr. Singh confirmed it. And what I need to tell you can't wait until tomorrow because by tomorrow, the situation may have changed. Changed how? Hale lowered his voice. Colonel Mercer knows we're here. The fluorescent light above the vending machine flickered once. Avery felt her stomach drop. Not a figure of speech, an actual physical sensation of her insides plunging downward like an elevator with a snap cable. How? She said. We don't know. Someone in the chain flagged our travel. Someone in Washington made a call. We left D.C. this morning with a sealed authorization, and by the time we landed in Florida, Mercer's office in Berlin had already requested a briefing on our movements. He has people inside the bureau. He has people everywhere. That's the problem. That's why we came to you directly instead of going through military channels. Military channels lead back to Mercer. Avery leaned against the wall. She crossed her arms, not defensive, structural, like she was physically holding herself together. What did he do when he found out? She asked. His office filed a formal protest with the Defense Intelligence Agency, claiming the investigation is based on fabricated intelligence and that the intercepted communications are a foreign disinformation operation designed to discredit a decorated officer. Of course he did. He also requested that any contact with former members of the Silent Ridge unit be suspended pending a national security review. A national security review that he controls. That's the implication, yes. So he's trying to shut you down before you can prove anything. He's trying to shut you down, Lieutenant. You're the only living witness who can confirm what actually happened on that mission. If your testimony is discredited, or if you're prevented from cooperating, the investigation dies. 4:34 p.m. Avery pushed off the wall. She started walking back toward the ER. Hale followed. "There's something else," he said. She didn't stop walking. "Of course there is. The intercepts from the individual using Jackson's credentials. The most recent one was sent 48 hours ago. It contained a specific request." Avery stopped. "A request for what?" "For you. The communication specifically asked the receiving party to locate Lieutenant Avery Caldwell and deliver a message." "What message?" Hale reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Not from the laptop, not from a classified file, a printed page. He held it out to her. Avery took it, unfolded it, read it. Her knees buckled. She didn't fall. She caught herself against the wall with one hand and stood there with the paper shaking in her grip. Her breath came in short, ragged pulls. Her eyes were locked on the words, and they wouldn't move. "What does it say?" Dana asked from 10 feet away, where she had been pretending not to watch. Avery didn't answer. She read it again, and again. The paper trembled so badly the words blurred. It said, "Tell Caldwell she was right. I made it to the road. Starfall still burns. Please find me. They won't let me come home." 4:38 p.m. Avery folded the paper with shaking hands and pressed it against her chest like a wound she was trying to stop bleeding. "Where was this sent from?" she asked. Her voice was wrecked, completely wrecked. The controlled, steady tone she'd maintained through the entire crisis was gone, and what was underneath was raw and terrible and human. "We traced the relay to a communications hub in Uzbekistan, but the origination point is masked. Multiple bounce points. Whoever is helping this individual has sophisticated operational security." "Helping him or holding him?" Hale paused. "We don't know." "You don't know. 6 years. A dead soldier sends a message saying he can't come home, and you don't know if he's a prisoner. That's one of the things we're trying to determine. Try harder. That's why we need your help." Avery looked at the paper pressed against her chest. She could feel her own heartbeat through it, thumping against the words like they were written on her skin. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "We need you to come to Washington." The sentence landed like a physical blow. Washington. The city where Douglas Mercer had friends in every corridor. The city where her name had been erased and her record had been sealed. The city where the truth about Silent Ridge had been locked in a vault and the key handed to the man who committed the crime. "Absolutely not," she said. "Lieutenant, I'm not walking into Washington where Mercer can reach me. I'm not sitting in a room full of people who helped bury me. I'm not—" "You'd be under federal protection. Full detail. Nobody touches you." Federal protection didn't protect the 12 people who went into Silent Ridge. It didn't protect Torres. It didn't protect Chen. It didn't protect Jackson, who apparently has been alive for 6 years while your government told his mother he was dead and buried in an empty box at Arlington. Hale absorbed that without flinching. He'd been hit with worse. "I understand your reluctance." "It's not reluctance, it's survival." 4:46 p.m. Patricia appeared at the end of the hallway. "Avery, Channel 7 is in the lobby. They want a statement from the nurse who ran the emergency response." The administrator told them no comment, but they're not leaving. Avery closed her eyes. The walls were closing in. FBI behind her, media in front. a review board sharpening its knives for tomorrow morning, a dead man sending messages from the other side of the world, and Douglas Mercer, 6,000 miles away in Berlin, pulling strings to make sure every door she tried to walk through slammed shut before she got there. "Tell them no comment," Avery said. "They already have your name." Someone from the ambulance crew talked. "Then tell them Avery Caldwell is a nurse who did her job and has nothing else to say." Patricia nodded and left. Hale waited until she was gone. The media attention is going to complicate things. Everything about this is complicated. If your name gets out publicly, Mercer will know exactly where you are. He already knows we came to Florida, but he may not know we've made contact with you yet. A news story changes that. So I'm supposed to hide? Again? Change my name again? Move again? Start over in another state, another hospital, another life where I pretend I'm nobody? Avery's voice was rising for the first time, not shouting, but climbing towards something she couldn't hold down anymore. "I've been hiding for 6 years. I hid in Tennessee. I hid here. I changed everything about my life to protect myself from a man who murdered his own soldiers and got promoted for it. And now you're standing here telling me to keep hiding while Derek Jackson is out there somewhere begging someone to bring him home. I'm not telling you to hide. I'm telling you to be strategic." "Strategic," she laughed, that same sharp, joyless sound from the conference room. Mercer was strategic when he called in that airstrike. He was strategic when he falsified the after-action report. He was strategic when he let a dead man's mother cry over an empty casket. Strategy is what got us here. 4:53 p.m. Dr. Hendricks chose that precise moment to walk down the hallway. He was a tall man, thin, with the kind of posture that suggested a lifetime of looking down at people and enjoying the angle. He wore a crisp white coat over pressed slacks, and his badge was positioned exactly at pocket height, just high enough to remind everyone of his title. He stopped when he saw Avery talking to Hale. His eyes moved from her to the agent and back. He didn't know who Hale was, but he knew the body language of federal authority when he saw it. "Nurse Caldwell," he said, not a greeting, a declaration of rank. "Dr. Hendricks, I've been reviewing the incident reports from today. I have significant concerns about the procedures you performed." "I'm sure you do." His jaw tightened. 3 needle decompressions without physician authorization. Atropine administration at emergency physician dosing levels. Triage decisions involving blood allocation that should have been made by a senior physician. These are not nursing interventions. There was no senior physician available. That doesn't give you the authority to. It gives me the obligation. Avery turned to face him fully. 20 patients, 0 deaths, 2 hours without a single attending in the building. What would you have preferred, Dr. Hendricks? That I stood there and watched them die while following protocol? His face reddened. Protocol exists for a reason. So does survival. Hale took a half step back. This wasn't his fight, but he watched it with the keen attention of a man who had just learned something important about the woman he was trying to recruit. "This will be addressed in the review tomorrow," Hendricks said stiffly. "I'll be there." "I should hope so. Your employment may depend on it." He turned and walked away. His shoes clicked on the linoleum with the rhythm of a man who believed he had already won. Avery watched him go. Her jaw was set so hard the muscles in her neck stood out like cables. "He wasn't here," she said to no one in particular. "He wasn't here, and he's going to punish me for being here." Hale said quietly, "You've seen this before. I've lived this before. A man with authority takes credit for the outcome and punishes the person who actually showed up." Mercer, Hendricks, different uniforms, same cowardice. 5:02 p.m. Avery went back to her patients. She checked on Miguel Reyes, who was sleeping. She checked on the firefighter, whose atropine levels were holding and whose breathing was steady. She checked on every yellow tag in the hallway, adjusting blankets, refilling water cups, answering questions from family members who had been allowed in after the lockdown lifted. She was checking a dressing on a teenage girl's arm when the girl grabbed her hand. "Are you the one?" the girl asked. "The nurse everyone's talking about?" "I'm just a nurse. My dad was in the car behind the tanker. They brought him in with a piece of metal in his leg. The big guy in room 4. Avery's breath caught. The femoral bleed. The man who had gripped the bed rails while she packed his wound with gauze and force. "He's stable," Avery said. "He's doing well. My mom said he would have died if you hadn't been here. A lot of people helped today. But you were the one, right? That's what everyone's saying." Avery gently freed her hand. "Your dad is strong. That's what saved him. Now let me check this dressing." The girl let her work, but her eyes never left Avery's face. 14 years old, and she was looking at Avery like she was looking at someone who had pulled her father back from the edge of a cliff. 5:11 p.m. Avery found a bathroom. She locked the door. She sat on the closed toilet lid and pressed her palms into her thighs. The paper from Hale was in her pocket. She could feel it against her hip like a heartbeat. "Tell Caldwell she was right. I made it to the road. Starfall still burns. Please find me. They won't let me come home." Jackson's face materialized in her mind. Not the broken, bleeding version from the ditch. The real version. The before version. 23 years old. A wide gap between his front teeth. A laugh that came out of nowhere and infected everyone around him. He called everyone Chief. He carried a photo of his daughter taped inside his helmet. He told Avery once, sitting on the hood of a Humvee at 3 in the morning, that when he got home, he was going to learn to bake bread because his daughter deserved a father who could make her breakfast. She had carried his body, what she thought was his body, 200 yards to a road. She had flagged down a farmer. She had put Jackson in the back of a truck and watched it drive away into dust and smoke. And then she had walked back into the silence alone. The army told her he died 3 hours later. Internal bleeding. Nothing anyone could have done. She had believed them. She had mourned him. She had dreamed about him nearly every night for 2 years. Dreams where she got there faster, packed the wound tighter, held pressure longer. Dreams where the math worked out differently, and he went home and learned to bake bread, and his daughter grew up with a father. And now, a piece of paper in her pocket said he was alive. 5:17 p.m. She left the bathroom. Hale was waiting in the hallway. She wasn't surprised. He was the kind of man who tracked people without appearing to move. "I'll go to Washington," she said. Hale blinked. It was the first time she'd seen him show surprise. "On conditions," she added. "Name them." "I'm not hiding. No safe house. No cover identity. I go as myself. Lieutenant Avery Caldwell. Full name. Full rank. If I'm going to face Mercer's machine, I'm not doing it from behind a curtain." That's dangerous. Hiding was dangerous too. It just hurt slower. "What else?" "I want the unredacted file on Silent Ridge. All of it. Every page Mercer sealed. Every report he falsified. Every communication he buried. If you want my testimony, I get to see what I'm testifying against. Some of that material is classified at a level that—" "I was there, Agent Hale. I bled on that ground. I held dying men in my arms. There is nothing in that file that I don't already carry in my body. Give me the paper version, or I walk." Hale studied her. The fluorescent light hummed above them. Somewhere in the ER, a monitor beeped steadily, the heartbeat of one of the 20 people she'd refused to let die. "I'll make the call," he said. "Make it now." He pulled out his phone and stepped away. Avery watched him dial. She watched his mouth move, forming words she couldn't hear. She watched his face shift, the slight tightening around the eyes that meant someone on the other end was pushing back. He hung up, walked back. "You'll have the file within 24 hours of arriving in Washington. The director has authorized full access contingent on your cooperation with the investigation." "And Jackson?" "We're working on locating him." Work faster. 5:24 p.m. She walked back into the ER one last time. The shift was changing. Night nurses were arriving, reading the chaos in the stained floors, in the exhausted faces, in the overstuffed hallways. Word had spread through the hospital like a current. What had happened, who had done it, and the impossible fact that a quiet nurse nobody remembered hiring had held the entire department together with her bare hands while the system failed around her. Patricia caught her at the door to the break room. "You're leaving, aren't you?" Avery looked at her. "How did you know?" "Because I watched those agents talk to you, and I watched your face when you came out of that conference room. And I've been a nurse long enough to recognize someone who just got called back to a war they thought was over." Avery didn't deny it. "Will you come back?" Patricia asked. "I don't know. The staff needs to know. They've been through hell today, and you're the reason they survived it. If you disappear tomorrow, tell them I had a family emergency." Is that what this is? Avery thought about Jackson's message, about Starfall, about a young man who wanted to bake bread for his daughter. "Yeah," she said, "that's exactly what this is." 5:31 p.m. She changed out of her scrubs in the locker room. She put on jeans and a gray t-shirt and sneakers that had seen better years. She closed her locker and noticed, for the first time, the small magnetic photo she'd stuck to the inside of the door 3 weeks ago. A group photo. 12 people in desert fatigues, squinting into sunlight, arms around each other, grinning like the world hadn't decided to destroy them yet. She peeled the photo off the locker door. She looked at every face. Torres with his lopsided smile, Chen with his arm around Jackson's shoulder, Jackson with that gap-toothed grin, flashing a peace sign, impossibly young, impossibly alive. She put the photo in her pocket next to the message. Then she walked out of Seaside Memorial Hospital, past the Channel 7 van, past the police cars, past the small crowd of people who had gathered because someone told them a miracle had happened inside. Agent Hale was standing by the black sedan. Reeves was in the driver's seat. Cho held the rear door open. Avery stopped 3 feet from the car. "If this goes wrong," she said to Hale, "if Mercer gets to me, if this whole thing falls apart, I need you to promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Find Jackson anyway. Whatever happens to me, find him. Bring him home. He's been out there long enough." Hale held her gaze for a long time. The parking lot lights were buzzing on as the sky dimmed. The hospital glowed behind her. 20 people were breathing inside it. "You have my word," he said. Avery got in the car. Cho closed the door. Reeves pulled out of the parking lot and turned north. In the rearview mirror, Seaside Memorial shrank and shrank until it was just a cluster of lights against the Florida dusk. And Avery pressed her forehead against the window and let herself feel the full, terrifying weight of what she had just agreed to do. Walk back into the machine that had tried to erase her, face the man who had tried to kill her, and drag the truth out of its grave with the same hands that had saved 20 lives that afternoon. The sedan merged onto the highway. The road stretched out ahead, dark and straight and infinite. Nobody in the car spoke. There was nothing left to say that the silence didn't already know. The sedan landed at Reagan National at 11:47 p.m. Avery hadn't slept. She had stared out the window for the entire flight. A chartered government plane, no commercial check-in, no boarding pass with her name on it. And she had turned Jackson's message over in her mind so many times the words had stopped being words and become something physical, something lodged between her ribs. Hale walked her through a side exit to a waiting SUV. Black. Government plates. Tinted windows so dark they looked painted. "We've arranged a room at a secure facility near the Hoover building," he said. "You'll have a security detail overnight." "I don't want a security detail. It's not optional." "How many people know I'm here?" Hale paused before answering. "More than I'd like." 11:52 p.m. The SUV pulled through a gated entrance and stopped in front of a nondescript building that could have been a hotel or a dentist's office or a CIA black site. Avery didn't ask which one it was. She got out, followed a uniformed officer to a room on the third floor, and sat on the edge of the bed without taking off her shoes. Her phone buzzed, a text from Dana. "The ER is still talking about you. The little boy is out of surgery. He's awake. He asked for the lady with the warm hands. That's you, Avery. Whatever is happening, please be safe." Avery read it 3 times. She pressed the phone against her forehead. Then she typed back 2 words. "Thank you." She didn't say more because more would have broken something she needed to keep intact for tomorrow. She lay down. She didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling and listened to her own breathing and waited for morning the way a soldier waits for a firefight, knowing it's coming, knowing it's going to hurt, and knowing there's no way through it except straight. 7:03 a.m. Hale knocked at her door. He had a coffee and a manila folder. "The file," he said, holding it out. "Unredacted, every page, as promised." Avery took it. The folder was heavier than she expected. Not physically heavy, but the weight of it pressed into her palms like it was made of something denser than paper. 6 years of her life sealed inside cardboard and government staples. She sat at the small desk and opened it. The first page was the mission brief for Operation Silent Ridge. She recognized the formatting. She recognized the authorization signatures. But the content was wrong. "This isn't what happened," she said. Hale sat across from her. "Keep reading." She turned pages. Her jaw tightened with each one. The after-action report stated that the 12-person unit had been deployed to extract a high-value intelligence asset from a compound in eastern Afghanistan. That part was true. It stated that the unit encountered unexpected resistance and sustained heavy casualties. Also true. But then the report diverged from reality so sharply it felt like reading fiction. Mission Commander Colonel Douglas Mercer ordered a tactical withdrawal upon determining the objective was compromised. She read aloud. All surviving personnel were extracted via rotary wing assets. Casualties were recovered and returned to base. She looked up at Hale. Rotary wing assets. He's saying helicopters came for us. That's what the report says. No helicopters came. Mercer canceled the medevac. He canceled extraction. He left us there and called in an airstrike on our own coordinates. Keep reading. She turned to the next page. Casualty list. 11 names, each followed by KIA, killed in action. She ran her finger down the list and stopped at the 7th name. Corporal Derek Jackson, KIA. She pressed her finger into the paper so hard it dented. They listed him as killed in action. They gave his mother a flag. They buried a casket at Arlington, and he was alive. Possibly alive, Hale corrected. He used the call sign, Agent Hale. He used Starfall. He knew about the road. That's not possibly. That's definitely. 7:14 a.m. She kept reading. The next section was the investigation summary, a 2-page document that described the internal review conducted by Mercer's own command chain. It concluded that all actions taken during Silent Ridge were consistent with standard operating procedure, and that no individual bore responsibility for the mission's failure. His own people investigated him, Avery said. That's like asking a fox to audit the hen house. That's the military justice system. That's corruption. She flipped to the final section. Her hands stopped. It was a psychological evaluation. Her name at the top, dated 3 weeks after the mission. Subject displays symptoms consistent with acute stress disorder, including paranoid ideation, confabulation, and distorted recollection of events. Subject's account of mission events is inconsistent with corroborated reports from commanding officer and is assessed to be unreliable. Recommendation: medical discharge with psychiatric follow-up. Classification: not fit for continued service. Avery read it twice. The second time her hands were shaking. They said I was crazy, she whispered. They didn't just bury the mission. They diagnosed me as mentally unfit, so that if I ever spoke up, no one would believe me. That evaluation was signed by Dr. William Trask, a military psychiatrist assigned to. I never met Dr. William Trask. I never had a psychiatric evaluation after Silent Ridge. That document is fabricated. Hale leaned forward. Can you prove that? Can I prove I didn't attend an appointment that never happened? How do you prove a negative? Medical records. If there's no intake form, no session notes, no billing, Mercer would have created those too. He created everything else. 7:22 a.m. Avery closed the folder. She pressed both hands flat on top of it, as if she could hold down everything inside from escaping into the room. 6 years, she said. 6 years I've been living as a ghost because this man wrote my entire life off as a delusion. I couldn't get a job that required a background check. I couldn't use my military training. I couldn't even tell a therapist what happened to me because the records say I'm a liar with a broken mind. She looked at Hale. Do you understand what that does to a person? To know the truth and have the whole world organized to say you're wrong? I have some idea. No, you don't. You go home at night and your name still belongs to you. Your history still belongs to you. Everything I was, everything I earned, everything I survived was taken from me by a man who murdered his own soldiers and then promoted himself on their graves. Hale said nothing. He let the silence hold her words. What happens now? She asked. At 9 o'clock, you'll meet with the DIA team heading the investigation. They'll take your formal statement. They'll ask you to walk through the entire mission, start to finish, every detail you can remember. And then we confront the part of this that nobody in that room wants to talk about. Which part? The part where Colonel Mercer isn't just a man who covered up a failed mission. He's a man who may be actively selling classified intelligence to a foreign power. And the only person who can connect the dots between what happened on Silent Ridge and what's happening now is you. 7:31 a.m. At 8:55 a.m., Avery walked into a conference room in a building she was told not to name, on a floor she was told didn't exist. 6 people were already seated. Hale introduced them by first names only. 2 from the DIA, 1 from the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, 1 military prosecutor from the Judge Advocate General's Corps, 1 intelligence analyst, and 1 person who wasn't introduced at all, a woman in her 60s who sat at the far end of the table and watched Avery with eyes that missed nothing. For the record, the military prosecutor said, please state your full name and rank. Avery Marie Caldwell, former Lieutenant, United States Army Special Operations. Former? I was medically discharged based on a psychiatric evaluation that was fabricated by my commanding officer to prevent me from reporting his actions during Operation Silent Ridge. The room shifted, not physically, but the energy changed. 6 people recalculating, recalibrating, reassessing the woman sitting in front of them. That's a serious allegation, the prosecutor said. Everything about this is serious. That's why you're all here. 9:04 a.m. They asked her to start from the beginning. She did. She told them about the deployment, the 12-person team, the objective, extract a high-value asset from a compound controlled by a militant faction. She told them about Mercer's briefing, how confident he was, how he described it as a clean in and out, 90 minutes on the ground. It went wrong within the first 20 minutes, Avery said. The compound wasn't lightly defended. It was a fortress. Someone had tipped them off. Our approach was compromised before we crossed the outer perimeter. Do you know who provided the intelligence for the operation? The DIA officer asked. Mercer said it came from a vetted asset. He said the source was ironclad, but when we hit the compound and found a prepared defense waiting for us, it was obvious the intelligence was either fabricated or intentionally leaked. You're suggesting the mission was set up to fail? I'm suggesting someone wanted us in that compound, knowing we wouldn't come out. The unnamed woman at the end of the table spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm and surgical. Why would Colonel Mercer send a team into a trap? Avery looked at her. Because the high-value asset we were sent to extract was going to testify about an intelligence sharing arrangement between Mercer and a foreign intermediary. If that asset talked, Mercer was finished. The mission wasn't an extraction, it was an elimination, disguised as a rescue. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that has weight. 9:17 a.m. That's an extraordinary claim, the prosecutor said. I was inside an extraordinary situation. Do you have evidence that the mission was deliberately compromised? I have the fact that 12 soldiers were sent into a kill zone with outdated intelligence, no air support, and a commanding officer who cut communications the moment things went wrong. I have the fact that when I radioed for medevac, Mercer denied the request. I have the fact that when I refused to abandon 3 wounded soldiers, Mercer called in an airstrike on our position. And I had the fact that the sole official account of what happened was written by the man who ordered the strike. We'll need to corroborate. Corroborate it with what? Every other witness is dead, except Jackson. And if you want Jackson's corroboration, you need to find him. The intelligence analyst spoke up. The communications from the individual using Jackson's credentials have continued. We intercepted a new transmission 6 hours ago. Avery's head snapped toward him. 6 hours ago? The content is still being analyzed, but the preliminary translation indicates a location reference. It's the first time the sender has provided geographic specifics. Where? The analyst looked at Hale. Hale looked at Avery. Northern Afghanistan, Hale said. A village called Darwan, approximately 40 kilometers from the original Silent Ridge operational area. Avery felt the room tilt. Not literally, but her inner equilibrium, the balance she had maintained for 6 years through willpower and denial, and the daily discipline of pretending to be someone she wasn't, shifted on its axis. He's been there the whole time, she said. 40 kilometers. He's been 40 kilometers from where I left him for 6 years. We don't know that. The transmission could have. He's there. He crawled off that road and someone took him in. And he's been surviving for 6 years in a place the rest of the world forgot about, while his government told his mother he was dead. 9:28 a.m. The unnamed woman leaned forward. Lieutenant Caldwell, if Corporal Jackson is alive and in Afghanistan, a recovery operation would need to be authorized at the highest levels. That authorization would require evidence that he's alive, that he's recoverable, and that the operation is strategically justified. Strategically justified? Avery repeated. He's an American soldier. That's the justification. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm telling you what the bureaucracy requires. The bureaucracy is what buried him in the first place, which is why we need your testimony to be airtight. If we can establish that Mercer falsified the after-action report, fabricated your psychiatric evaluation, and deliberately compromised the mission, we can dismantle his credibility. And once his credibility is gone, the official record collapses. Jackson's death certificate gets voided, and a recovery operation becomes legally and politically viable. Avery stared at her. Who are you? The woman didn't blink. I'm the person who's going to make sure Douglas Mercer faces a court-martial if you give me enough to work with. 9:34 a.m. The debrief continued for 3 more hours. Avery walked them through every minute of the mission. The approach, the ambush, the first casualties, Sergeant Williams and Corporal Diaz, killed instantly by an IED at the compound gate. The firefight that erupted from 3 directions simultaneously. The retreat to a secondary position. Mercer's voice on the radio, increasingly agitated, increasingly distant, increasingly focused on his own survival rather than theirs. She told them about Torres, how he took a round through the femoral artery, and how she clamped it with her fingers while bullets hit the wall above their heads. How he looked at her and said, "Doc, am I going to make it?" And she said, "Yes, because that's what you say, even when you know the math doesn't work." She told them about Chen, 22 years old, spinal injury from a blast concussion, paralyzed from the chest down, fully conscious, staring at the sky and asking her to tell his daughter he loved her. She told them about Jackson. Bilateral pneumothorax, both lungs punctured by shrapnel. She performed needle decompressions in a ditch with her hands covered in other men's blood, while Mercer's airstrike lit up the sky above them. "The same procedure you performed yesterday in the ER," Hale said. "Yes, on instinct, on training, and on memory. Every time I put a needle in someone's chest, I'm back in that ditch. Every single time." 12:41 p.m. They broke for lunch. Avery didn't eat. She stood in the hallway outside the conference room and pressed her back against the wall and felt the tremor in her hands that she had been hiding for 4 hours. Hale found her there. "You're doing well," he said. "Don't manage me." "I'm not managing you. I'm telling you the truth. The team in there is convinced. Your account is consistent, detailed, and it matches the intercepts in ways that the official report doesn't. We're building a case." "Building a case takes months. Jackson might not have months. We're pushing for an accelerated timeline." "Push harder." Hale's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His face changed. Not dramatically, not the way a civilian's face changes when they get bad news. The way a federal agent's face changes when a variable shifts and the entire equation recalculates. "What?" Avery said. "Mercer just landed at Dulles." The hallway seemed to narrow. "He's here? In Washington?" "He flew in from Berlin 3 hours ago on a military transport. No advance notice, no scheduled meetings. He just showed up." "He knows." "We don't know that." "He's here, Agent Hale. The same day I'm giving testimony against him, he flies across the Atlantic with no warning. He knows." 12:49 p.m. The afternoon session started at 1:15 p.m. The energy in the room had changed. Everyone had heard about Mercer's arrival. The unnamed woman, who Avery now suspected was far more senior than anyone had acknowledged, was on her phone for the entire break, speaking in clipped sentences that Avery couldn't hear. "We need to accelerate," the woman said as everyone sat down. "Mercer's presence changes the timeline. If he's here to interfere with the investigation, we need Caldwell's full testimony on record before he has a chance to file injunctions." The prosecutor nodded. "Lieutenant Caldwell, we're going to move to the final phase of the mission, the airstrike." Avery's hands went flat on the table. She pressed hard. Her fingertips whitened. "Okay," she said. "Walk us through the moment Colonel Mercer ordered the strike." She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she wasn't in a conference room anymore. She was in a ditch in Afghanistan with 3 dying men and a radio that had just delivered a death sentence. "I was working on Jackson's chest," she said. "Second needle decompression. Torres was beside me. He'd stopped talking. Chen was behind us, conscious but unable to move. I radioed Mercer for medevac. He said it was denied. I asked him why. He said the extraction zone was compromised and all assets were being pulled back. I told him I had 3 wounded who couldn't move. He said..." She stopped, swallowed. "He said, 'That's no longer my problem, Lieutenant. Withdraw or be left behind.' I told him I wouldn't leave them." There was a long pause, maybe 10 seconds. Then he said, "Then God help you." And the line went dead. How long between that communication and the airstrike? 4 minutes, maybe 5. I heard the jets before I saw them. I grabbed Jackson and dragged him into the drainage ditch. Chen couldn't be moved without killing him. I had to choose. I chose the one I could carry. And Torres? Torres was already gone. He bled out while I was on the radio with Mercer. He died listening to his commanding officer abandon him. 1:32 p.m. The room was completely still. The intelligence analyst had stopped typing. The prosecutor had stopped writing. The unnamed woman's phone was face down on the table, and she hadn't touched it in 20 minutes. Avery continued. "The bombs hit. Free passes. I covered Jackson with my body in the ditch. The concussions were, she paused, found the words. It felt like being hit by a car 3 times. I couldn't hear for 2 days afterward. When it stopped, I climbed out. Chen was dead. Torres was dead. The compound was gone. Everything was gone. And Jackson? Alive. Barely. I carried him to a road. A farmer stopped. I put Jackson in the back of his truck and told the farmer to drive to the nearest village with a clinic. The farmer drove away. I collapsed on the road. A patrol found me 6 hours later. And you were told Jackson died. 3 weeks later, at Walter Reed, a chaplain came to my room and told me that Corporal Jackson had succumbed to his injuries at a local medical facility. No details, no location, no opportunity to say goodbye. And then Mercer's people came with a psychiatric evaluation that said I was unfit and delusional. And that was the end of Lieutenant Avery Caldwell. The unnamed woman spoke. Until yesterday, Avery met her eyes. Until yesterday. 1:40 p.m. The door opened. Agent Reeves stepped in and went straight to Hale. She whispered something in his ear. Hale's jaw clenched visibly. We have a development, Hale said to the room. Colonel Mercer's legal team just filed an emergency motion with the FISA court to have the intercepts classified as inadmissible on national security grounds. They're arguing that any intelligence derived from the Silent Ridge communications is compromised and should be sealed. On what basis? The prosecutor demanded. They're claiming that the communications are part of a foreign disinformation campaign designed to destabilize confidence in military leadership. They're also claiming that Lieutenant Caldwell is a psychologically compromised individual whose cooperation with this investigation constitutes a security risk. Avery laughed. Short, sharp, and brutal. There it is, the same playbook. 6 years later, same playbook. Discredit the evidence, discredit the witness, make everything disappear. The unnamed woman stood up. She picked up her phone. She looked at Hale. How fast can you get me in front of a judge? Tonight if we push. Push. She looked at Avery. Lieutenant, your testimony just became the most important document in this investigation. If Mercer succeeds in sealing those intercepts, your first-hand account is the only evidence that survives. Do you understand what that means? It means I'm the only thing standing between Mercer and another 6 years of getting away with murder. It means you're the target now, not the investigation, not the intercepts. You. Avery stood up. She was tired. She was terrified. She was carrying the weight of 12 soldiers, a buried mission, a dead man who wasn't dead, and a government that had thrown her away. But she stood up straight. I've been a target before, she said. Mercer dropped bombs on me and I'm still here. Whatever he sends next, I'll still be here. The unnamed woman almost smiled. Good, she said, because we're just getting started. 1:47 p.m. Exactly 24 hours since a chemical tanker had exploded in Port Sentinel, Florida, and a ghost had stepped out of the shadows and remembered who she was. Avery pressed her hand against the pocket where Jackson's message still rested against her hip. Starfall still burns. She was going to make damn sure it burned bright enough to bring the whole lie down. The emergency motion hit the FISA court at 6:14 p.m. Mercer's legal team had filed 47 pages of arguments, citing national security protocols, classification statutes, and a clause buried so deep in defense law that the prosecutor had to read it 3 times before he understood what it meant. It was a kill shot aimed at the entire investigation. Seal the intercepts, discredit the witness, close the file, walk away clean. The unnamed woman, whose name Avery had finally learned, was Judge Advocate General Catherine Raines, the most senior military prosecutor in the Department of Defense, stood in a federal courtroom at 7:02 p.m. and argued for 45 minutes that the motion was an obstruction attempt by a man trying to cover up war crimes. Avery wasn't allowed in the courtroom. She sat in a hallway on a wooden bench with Hale beside her and listened to muffled voices through a closed door while her entire future was debated by people she'd never met. "What happens if the judge sides with Mercer?" she asked. "The intercepts get sealed. Jackson's communications become classified material that can't be used as evidence. The investigation loses its foundation. And me? Your testimony still exists, but without the intercepts to corroborate it, Mercer's lawyers will argue it's the uncorroborated account of a discharged officer with a documented psychiatric history. A fabricated psychiatric history. We know that, but the judge doesn't. Not yet." 7:38 p.m. The courtroom door opened. Raines walked out. Her face revealed nothing, the kind of controlled blankness that could mean victory or catastrophe. She walked straight to Avery. "The judge denied Mercer's motion," she said. Avery's chest unlocked. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath until the air rushed back in. "The intercepts stay in evidence," Raines continued, "and the judge did something else. She issued a preservation order on all classified materials related to Silent Ridge. That means Mercer can't destroy, alter, or reclassify any document connected to the mission. Everything is frozen." "He'll find a way around it," Avery said. "He'll try. That's why we moved tonight." "Move how?" Raines looked at Hale. Hale looked at Avery. "A new intercept came in 40 minutes ago," Hale said, "while we were in court. Jackson's communication, the one with geographic specifics, it included a time reference. He's asking for extraction. He used the word specifically, extraction, and he gave a window. How long? 72 hours. Avery stood up from the bench so fast the wood groaned. 72 hours? That means he's in danger. If he's giving a window, it means something has changed. Someone is closing in on him, or the people protecting him are about to stop. "That's our assessment as well," Raines said, "which is why I've requested emergency authorization for a recovery operation." "Requested from who?" "The Secretary of Defense." The words landed like stones dropped into deep water. Secretary of Defense. That meant this had gone past the FBI, past the DIA, past the legal system, and into the highest tier of military authority in the United States. "Mercer has allies at that level," Avery said. "Mercer has allies everywhere, but he doesn't have the intercepts. He doesn't have your testimony, and as of 20 minutes ago, he doesn't have judicial cover. The ground is shifting under him. He knows it." 7:52 p.m. Avery's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Ms. Caldwell." The voice was male, controlled, and cold in a way that felt manufactured. "My name is General Thomas Whitfield. I serve as Colonel Mercer's direct superior in the European command structure. I'm calling as a courtesy." Avery's blood went cold. She hit the speaker button so Hale could hear. "A courtesy," she repeated. "Colonel Mercer is a decorated officer with 31 years of distinguished service. Whatever allegations are being manufactured against him, I want you to understand that the full weight of his chain of command stands behind him." "Did you call to threaten me, General?" "I called to inform you that the individuals encouraging your cooperation with this investigation do not have your best interests at heart. They are using you as a pawn in a political operation that will not end well for you." "My best interests," Avery's voice went flat and dangerous, "were my best interests a priority when Mercer called in an airstrike on 12 American soldiers? Were my best interests a priority when he fabricated a psychiatric evaluation to silence me? Were my best interests a priority when he told Derek Jackson's mother her son was dead and buried in an empty casket?" Silence on the line. 3 seconds. 5. "I see you've chosen your path," Whitfield said. "I chose my path 6 years ago in a ditch in Afghanistan. This is just the first time anyone let me walk it." The line went dead. Hale took the phone from her hand. "We're recording all incoming calls. That conversation is now evidence of witness intimidation by a senior military official. It's also proof that Mercer's network reaches higher than a colonel in Berlin. We know. That's why Raines is involved. She doesn't answer to the military chain. She answers to the Attorney General. 8:04 p.m. At 9:30 p.m., Raines called Avery back into the conference room. The team was reassembled. Hale, Reeves, Cho, the DIA officers, the prosecutor, the intelligence analyst. But there were new faces now. Two men in uniforms that carried the quiet authority of Special Operations Command. They didn't introduce themselves. Authorization has been granted, Raines said. A recovery team is being deployed to the Darwan region within 12 hours. Their mission is to locate, authenticate, and extract the individual communicating under Corporal Jackson's credentials. Avery gripped the edge of the table. Who's leading the team? That's classified. I should be there. Every person in the room looked at her. I know the terrain. I know Jackson. I can authenticate him on site. If your team goes in and finds someone they can't confirm, the mission stalls. If I'm there, it takes one look. You're a civilian, the prosecutor said. I was a special operations trauma officer. I've operated in that exact region. I know the village structures, the local dynamics, the routes between compounds. And Jackson trusts me. If he's been hiding for 6 years, he's not going to walk out of a hole for strangers with guns. He'll walk out for me. Raines studied her. The two special operations officers exchanged a glance. The risk to you is extreme, Raines said. The risk to Jackson if you send people he doesn't recognize is worse. He'll run, or the people protecting him will panic. You get one chance at this. One. Send me. 9:47 p.m. Raines left the room to make a phone call. She was gone for 14 minutes. When she came back, her face was set in an expression Avery recognized. The face of someone who has just pushed through a wall and isn't sure the structure will hold. You're authorized, Raines said. Non-combatant advisory role. You will not carry a weapon. You will not participate in tactical operations. Your sole function is positive identification and psychological facilitation of the subject's extraction. Fine. If the situation becomes hostile, you follow the team commander's orders without exception. Understood. And Lieutenant, this is not an official reinstatement of your commission. You're going as a civilian consultant. Is that clear? Crystal. But when Avery stood up from that table, she didn't stand like a civilian consultant. She stood like a soldier who had just been told that the war she thought was over still had one more mission. 11:15 p.m. She was on a military transport by midnight. The aircraft was loud and cold and smelled like jet fuel and canvas. She sat on a jump seat next to 6 special operations soldiers who communicated in glances and hand signals and said almost nothing. The team leader, a captain whose name she was given as Ross, sat across from her. You were 528th Medical Detachment, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. I read the file on Silent Ridge, the real file, not Mercer's version. And I want you to know that every man on this aircraft volunteered for this mission after they read it. Avery looked down the row. 6 faces, young, focused. The same look she'd seen on Torres, in Chen, and Jackson before everything went wrong. Bring him home, she said. That's all I'm asking. That's why we're here. She leaned her head back against the fuselage and closed her eyes. The engines roared. The aircraft lifted. And Avery Caldwell flew east, back toward the place that had destroyed her, carrying nothing but a folded piece of paper and a word that meant, we're still us. 18 hours later, Darwan, Afghanistan, 3:47 p.m. local time. The village was small, a handful of compounds clustered along a dry riverbed. Ross's team had inserted 2 kilometers south and moved on foot through terrain that Avery's body remembered before her mind did. The dust, the elevation, the way the air thinned at altitude and made every breath a negotiation. They reached the outer edge of the village at 3:52 p.m. Ross held up a fist. Everyone stopped. Compound 3, the intelligence analyst said through the earpiece. Signal origin traced to the northeastern structure. Ross looked at Avery. You ready? I've been ready for 6 years. The team moved. Avery followed. Her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her temples, in her wrists, in her teeth. Every step closer to that compound was a step back in time, back to the ditch, back to the blood, back to the moment she put Jackson in the back of a farmer's truck and watched him disappear. Ross reached the compound door. He signaled 2 operators to flank. He raised 3 fingers. 2. 1. The door opened. Not by force. From the inside. An old man stood there. Afghan. 70s. Weathered hands. He looked at the soldiers. He looked at their weapons. He didn't flinch. He looked at Avery, and he smiled. You came, he said in accented English. He said you would come. 3:58 p.m. The old man led them through a narrow corridor to a back room. Avery's legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Each step was an act of will against a body that wanted to collapse under the weight of 6 years of grief. The old man stopped at a door. He turned to Avery. He is not the same, the old man said gently. He is hurt. He is tired. But he is alive. He never stopped believing you would come. He opened the door. The room was small. A man sat on a low cot against the far wall. He was thin, dangerously thin. His hair was long and streaked with gray that didn't belong on a 29-year-old. His left leg was gone below the knee. His hands were folded in his lap, and they were trembling. But his eyes were the same, wide, brown, carrying that look she had never been able to forget. Not fear, not pain, but trust. Absolute, boundless, childlike trust. He looked at her. Hey, Doc, Derek Jackson said. His voice cracked on the second word, and his face crumbled, and he pressed his hand over his mouth to hold back something that had been building for 6 years. Avery crossed the room in 3 steps. She dropped to her knees beside the cot and took his face in her hands. The same hands that had performed needle decompressions in a ditch. The same hands that had saved 20 lives in a Florida ER. The same hands that had held his while bombs fell from the sky. I'm here, she said. I'm here, Jackson. I'm here. He broke, completely. 6 years of isolation, of pain, of waiting, of sending messages into the void and hoping someone would hear. It all came out in a sound that wasn't crying and wasn't screaming, but something between the two that made Ross turn away and the operators by the door stare at the floor. They said I was dead, Jackson choked out. They told me nobody was looking. They said you were discharged, that you were gone, that nobody remembered Silent Ridge. I remember. I never stopped remembering. I tried to come home. I tried. But my leg and the border and Mercer had people watching. I couldn't. It's over. Jackson, listen to me. It's over. We're taking you home. He grabbed her wrists. His grip was weak but desperate. Starfall, he whispered. Starfall, she said back. 4:07 p.m. Ross's medic performed a field assessment. Jackson was malnourished, dehydrated, and his amputated leg, which had been crudely removed by a village doctor 2 years into his ordeal, showed signs of chronic infection. But he was stable. He was conscious. He was going to make it. The old man, whose name was Fareed, had sheltered Jackson since the day Avery put him in the back of that truck. The farmer had driven him not to a clinic, but to Fareed's home, 20 kilometers away. Fareed's son was a doctor. He saved Jackson's life. And for 6 years, Fareed's family had hidden him, fed him, protected him from the militants who controlled the region, and from the American military apparatus that had declared him dead. Why? Avery asked Fareed. Why did you risk your family for a stranger? Fareed looked at her with an expression so simple and so profound, it made her chest ache. Because someone brought him to my door, he said. And when God brings a wounded man to your door, you do not close it. Avery thought of the ER, the 20 patients, the doors that kept opening, the people who kept coming. She understood Fareed in a way that went beyond language or culture or nationality. She understood him because she lived by the same law. When someone is dying in front of you, you don't look away. 4:22 p.m. The extraction helicopter arrived at 4:31 p.m. Ross's team carried Jackson on a stretcher. Avery walked beside him, one hand on his shoulder, refusing to break contact. As the helicopter lifted off, Jackson looked out the open door at the village shrinking below them, at the compound where he'd spent 6 years, at Fareed, who stood in the doorway watching them go. He saved my life, Jackson said. Every single day for 6 years, that man saved my life. I know, Avery said, and now we're going to save yours, properly this time. Jackson looked at her. What happened to Mercer? He's about to find out what happens when the person he tried to bury comes back from the dead. Both of us. 9 days later, Washington, D.C., 10 a.m. The hearing room was packed. Military brass, congressional oversight members, federal prosecutors, media behind closed doors. The hearing itself was classified, but the fact that it was happening had leaked, and every major network had a correspondent outside the building. Colonel Douglas Mercer sat at a table with 3 lawyers flanking him. He wore his dress uniform, every medal, every ribbon. 31 years of service pinned to his chest like armor. His face was composed. His posture was perfect. He looked like a man who had never lost a fight in his life. Avery sat across the aisle. She wore civilian clothes, no medals, no uniform, no armor except the truth. Raines stood and addressed the tribunal. The prosecution calls Lieutenant Avery Caldwell. Avery rose. She walked to the witness chair. She placed her hand on the Bible. She swore to tell the truth. And then she told it. All of it. Every minute, every death, every lie. She told them about the ambush, about Mercer cutting communications, about the airstrike he ordered on his own soldiers, about Torres bleeding out on the radio, about Chen dying in a ditch, about Jackson's lungs collapsing and her hands shaking as she drove needles into his chest while the sky burned. She told them about the fabricated psychiatric evaluation, the sealed records, the erased identity, 6 years of hiding in plain sight while the man who killed her team collected promotions and diplomatic postings. Mercer's lead attorney cross-examined her for 2 hours. He questioned her memory, her mental state, her motives. He suggested she was bitter, unstable, driven by a personal vendetta against a superior officer. Avery didn't flinch. She answered every question with the same steady, unflinching precision she'd used to save 20 lives in a Florida ER. And then Raines called the second witness. The prosecution calls Corporal Derek Jackson. Mercer's face changed. For the first time in the entire proceeding, the mask cracked. His composure fractured like a plate dropped on concrete. His mouth opened. His eyes widened. He grabbed his attorney's arm. Jackson walked into the hearing room on a prosthetic leg and a cane. He was still too thin. His uniform, newly issued, hung on his frame. But he walked upright. He walked steady. And when he passed Mercer's table, he stopped. He didn't say anything. He just looked at the colonel. The man who had ordered the airstrike. The man who had declared him dead. The man who had let his mother grieve over an empty box for 6 years. Jackson looked at him the way the dead look at the living when they come back to collect what's owed. Then he walked to the witness chair and sat down. Corporal Jackson, Raines said, can you identify the officer who ordered the airstrike on your unit's position during Operation Silent Ridge? Jackson raised his hand. He pointed directly at Mercer. Colonel Douglas Mercer, he said. He killed my brothers. He tried to kill me, and when he couldn't, he erased me. Mercer's attorney objected. The tribunal overruled. Jackson testified for 3 hours.
He corroborated every detail of Avery's account.
The ambush, the denied medevac, the airstrike, the abandonment. And he added something Avery didn't know, that after the bomb stopped, before she found him, he had heard Mercer's voice on an open channel, speaking to someone in a language Jackson didn't understand, passing information, coordinates, asset locations. He wasn't just covering up a failed mission, Jackson said. He was trading intelligence. He sold us, all of us.
The mission was never supposed to succeed.
We were the price of whatever deal he made. The hearing room erupted. 4 days later, Colonel Douglas Mercer was arrested by military police at his hotel in Washington, D.C. He was charged with 12 counts of negligent homicide, 3 counts of deliberate falsification of military records, 2 counts of obstruction of justice, and 1 count of espionage. His medals were stripped. His rank was revoked. His 31-year career ended in handcuffs and a perp walk that every network in America broadcast live. General Thomas Whitfield, who had called Avery to threaten her, was placed under investigation the following week. 3 additional officers in Mercer's chain of command were suspended pending review. Derek Jackson's death certificate was voided. His mother, a 63-year-old woman named Gloria Jackson from Bakersfield, California, was flown to Walter Reed Medical Center, where she walked into a hospital room and saw her son alive for the first time in 6 years. She didn't speak. She didn't scream. She pressed her hand against his face and held it there, her fingers reading the bones underneath like Braille, making sure he was real. Jackson introduced her to a 6-year-old girl she had never met, his daughter, born while he was deployed, raised by her mother, and now standing in a hospital room looking at a father she had only seen in photographs. "This is Lily," Jackson said to his mother, "and Lily, this is your grandma." Gloria Jackson fell to her knees and pulled that child into her arms, and the sound she made was not grief anymore. It was something else, something that had been locked inside a sealed casket for 6 years and was finally free. Avery wasn't in the room for that reunion. She had asked not to be. Some moments are too sacred for witnesses. She was standing in the hallway outside, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed and her eyes closed, listening to the muffled sounds of a family being rebuilt through a closed door. Hale found her there. "Raines wants to talk to you about reinstatement," he said. "Full restoration of rank, back pay, formal recognition of your actions during Silent Ridge." "I'll think about it." The hospital in Florida called too, Patricia Okoye. She said the staff wants you back. She said the little boy, the 4-year-old with the splenic laceration, his mother named the family dog Avery. Avery laughed, a real laugh, the first one in longer than she could remember. "That might be the best thing anyone's ever done for me," she said. "What are you going to do?" Hale asked. Avery opened her eyes. She looked at the closed door where Gloria Jackson was holding her son and her granddaughter and relearning what it felt like to be whole. "I'm going to go back to work," she said. "People get hurt every day. They need someone who shows up. You could do anything. Pentagon, VA, any trauma center in the country would hire you tomorrow." "I don't want any trauma center in the country. I want the one in Port Sentinel, Florida, with the lousy coffee and the fluorescent lights and the nurses who froze for 2 seconds and then got back up and kept fighting." Hale smiled. It was the first time she'd seen him do it. "Lieutenant Caldwell," he said. "Don't call me that. Avery. Better." She pushed off the wall. She straightened her back. She walked down the hallway toward the elevator, past the uniformed officers and the federal agents and the lawyers and the bureaucrats, past all the machinery that had tried to grind her into nothing. She pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. She stepped in, and as the doors closed, she reached into her pocket and touched the folded paper that still rested there. The message from a man the government said was dead, written in words that only 12 people on Earth would understand. "Starfall still burns. It always had. Through the bombs and the lies and the silence and the years of pretending to be nobody. Through the blood on the ER floor and the 4-year-old boy who asked for the lady with warm hands.
Through the needle decompressions
And the impossible decisions. And the 20 lives that refused to end on her watch. Avery Caldwell had never stopped burning. She just finally stopped hiding the light.